Hi there, I'm Mike from ATB Guitars and welcome to Q&A with Mike number 15. So thank you for all your questions on Instagram, on YouTube, by email, etc. Some really good ones this time round, so stay tuned to the end as I'm sure there'll be a question and answer here, hopefully an answer which will interest you. We're going to kick off straight away with a question from Hot Black Desatio, I think that's how you pronounce it, on YouTube, who asked me, how often do you come across a guitar that is so good that you just have to keep it for your own private collection? Also, do you recall selling any specific guitars that you still dream about? Okay, that's a very good question, Hot Black, and it's a question which I know probably quite a lot of vintage guitar dealers are being asked and probably have been asked and are asking themselves, and it's a bit of a dilemma when you come across a really good vintage guitar that you totally gel with. It's very tempting to stash it away in your own private collection. I know quite a few people do that, and when I started off many years ago, I started doing it myself. I built up a small personal collection of guitars which I really gelled with and loved, and it got to the stage where it was a little bit of a liability in terms that if I didn't have it at a store, it was at my home, and I had to get insurance, and I was a bit worried about break-ins, things like that. So I decided a while ago that I wouldn't have so much of a personal collection. I would make sure that what we actually stock encompasses a wide range of guitars. So if I ever needed one to play or do a recording session or something, then I'd just come into the store, pick one off a wall, and walk out and use it. I guess that's one of the advantages of being a vintage guitar dealer. You have free rein to do that if you like. But the guitars which are memorable to me, I remember a long time ago I had a 57 Strat which I dearly loved. It felt absolutely fantastic, V-neck. It was a hardtail model as well, which I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but to me this felt amazing. It was very early on, it was one of my first true vintage guitars, and I hung on to that for 15 years, I guess, which is a long time for me. Recently we've had a couple of mono 355s last year, which were really nice. I wouldn't have minded hanging on to one of those if I was that way minded, but I didn't. In the end we sold them, and we sold them to customers who are going to use them, which is better, I think, than me just sort of keeping it at home and probably only using it once every couple of months. I don't play as much as I used to, so they don't get a great deal of use. Other guitars, I like 64 335s, and of course we've had a few bursts recently which are absolutely amazing guitars. If you've never played a real one, you need to think about trying to find a way of doing that, as the myth can be magic sometimes, and those guitars are quite amazing. Okay, another question we have from Instagram. This is from Jack Bowles, who asks, everyone talks about bursts, but customs. What's the Holy Grail Les Paul custom for you guys? Okay, good point. Everyone seems to talk about bursts, and customs are often considered the lesser guitar, but in fact they're not. They're not at all, in my opinion. And at the moment, customs are really good value for money. What is the Holy Grail custom for us? I would say, for me personally, it would be two different sorts of custom. The first one being, I think for me personally, my Holy Grail custom would be a really nice condition, all original 1968 Les Paul custom, early 68, with the one-piece neck, dotted eye, one-piece body, the chunkier neck, which you get in the early 68s, which is more like the 59 style neck, and the early pattern on the routing of the control cavity. Now, that's the only reason that is my holy grail is because to pick up customs from the 50s are so difficult to find. We've never sold one, unfortunately. I've only seen two. I saw one on an eBay auction many years ago, which went for a lot of money at the time, but since then I've only seen two others, and they're changing hands for a lot of money when they come up. But I guess Holy Grail wise, that would be the thing, a two pickup Les Paul Custom from the 50s, which I know I'll probably never find, but if you can't find that, or if I couldn't find that, my next Holy Grail would be a very early 1968 Les Paul Custom, closely followed by a late 50s three pickup PAF Custom, which I think are underrated guitars. We have one here at the moment on the wall. It's a 57. It plays absolutely beautifully, even with the skinny low profile frets, and sounds stunning, absolutely awesome, as good as any burst, and the pickup position in the middle produces a nice sort of out of phase sound, which is unique for a Les Paul. Very versatile guitar. So that would be my holy grail in customs terms. And yes, what about the customs? That's a good point. They're underappreciated, I think. So good shout to Jack Bowles for that one. Okay, another question here from Instagram from Brian's Quib, who asks, do you see the source of your vintage stock changing over the next few years? Good question. Possibly it could. However, the source is really dictated by the demand. If nobody wants certain guitars, then nobody's really going to want to sell them because they're not going to achieve the potential which a lot of owners think they will. So I don't see in the near future the demand for certain vintage guitars decreasing or changing. Maybe it will. Maybe there'll be a really famous or to be famous player comes along playing something really weird in the vintage guitar line, and then all of a sudden everyone wants one. It's very much dictated by fashion in those terms, so it could change, but the source will probably remain the same. We get an awful lot of our guitars through trade-ins from people who come to us with guitars that they know of, or their people have passed away and they want to sell on their collections, or their relatives want to sell on collections. That's probably not going to change over the next few years. We get a lot of people coming to us who refer us from other dealers because they don't specialise in vintage stuff. And I travel to shows as well to purchase some. I don't think that's going to change over the next few years, really. I think it hasn't changed over the last 20 years, really. It's always been pretty much the same. So I see that continuing. The only threat to that recently was the COVID outbreak, which took its toll on travelling, as everyone knows. And it also took its toll on the availability of vintage guitars because people couldn't come into their dealers and trade them on. But so it was very difficult to get guitars then, and a lot of the sources have dried up. But I don't personally see the sources changing over the next few years. Okay, interesting question here from Intersound Guitars on Instagram, who asks, do you think the coming economic downturn will affect vintage guitar prices? That's an interesting question as well. Well, it may do. That's the answer. But I don't have a crystal ball, and it's very difficult to predict. In 2006, 2007, and 2008, the price of guitars fluctuated wildly. This was during the boom and bust of those particular years. There's similarities to that at the moment, but our economic downturn is not related to the same causes as it was back in 2008. So I see a lot more people predicting that it's not going to be quite as bad and it's not going to crash, although some of the stocks I've invested in seems to have crashed, which is another story. But at the moment, vintage guitar prices are holding pretty well. I think if the housing markets in the UK collapses, when I mean collapse, I mean if it drops by something like 15%, then we may start to see a downturn in vintage guitars. But at the moment, they're doing really well. In fact, I personally think I invest in a lot of different things, and the only two categories I've invested in which have actually done really well during the downturn is art and vintage guitars, or art and collectibles basically, which guitars fall under that category. And alt investments like those have done pretty well. So I don't think it'll affect prices too much, and obviously I'm hoping it won't affect prices too much, but if it does, then there's bound to be some bargains to pick up, because if it does turn down in terms of price, it won't last for that long, I don't think, going by previous records. Okay, here's another one by Nick Taylor 4 on Instagram, who asked a very simple question: do you ever sell left-handed vintage guitars? Well, Nick, yes we do. Unfortunately, we don't have any right now at all, which I know is frustrating for those left-handers out there. We have sold them in the past, but they've often sold before they've hit the website. If they have made it to the website, then it's a very tricky market, because we could be sitting on one for ages. I guess there's not so much market for left-handers because there's not so many left-handers out there. And we've sat on some guitars for a long time. Others we've sold very, very quick. So we tend to be a bit cautious when we're buying left-handed vintage guitars. We have to price them up realistically when we buy them, and we have to make sure they're priced realistically when we sell them. And there's not that many which are offered to us on that basis. A lot of people seem to think their left-hand guitar is worth a huge amount of money, and we personally sort of shy away from those type of deals because we find them slightly unrealistic. Well, thank you ever so much for all your wonderful questions. We'll be doing a few more of these, so if you do have any more questions you'd like answered by myself, then please just get in touch, leave any comments below, contact us by email, Messenger, Instagram or Facebook, or whatever method you like, or WhatsApp. All the numbers are on our website, and hopefully if you'd like this, then give us a thumbs up, and please subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye.